All right, listeners, ready to jump into some seriously fascinating territory.
Yeah, sounds good.
We're talking Army Special Operations.
Okay.
We're going to be breaking down this ADP 305 Army Special Operations document from July 2019.
Yeah.
So this deep dive is basically like your shortcut to understanding how the Army views and utilizes these, well, elite forces.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, it goes way beyond just like, Hollywood action sequences and stuff.
Right, way beyond.
So much more to it.
Absolutely.
So maybe we should start with how does the Army actually define special operations?
Well, the way they put it is it's all about, well, they emphasize that it's all about providing a range of options, like strategic, operational, and tactical options for reaching, those really big picture national goals.
Okay, interesting.
And they even have this powerful phrase they use in the document. They say, special operations leverage understanding of relevant actors' motivations and the underpinning of their will to achieve effects of a magnitude disproportionate to the size of the force.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is. Right. But it's really powerful when you think about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of about maximizing impact while keeping a relatively, small footprint, would you say?
Exactly, yeah. Think about influencing global events
Yeah.
without having to do massive deployments of troops or anything like that. That's the kind of leverage they aim for.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And to do that, they've actually got these 12 guiding principles,
Wow.
or imperatives is what they're called in the document.
12. Okay, that's quite a list.
It is.
I'm curious, which ones really jump out at you as being really core to the special ops mindset?
I think for me, recognize political implications and anticipate long-term effects. Those two are just crucial. They really highlight how, special ops can't just be operating in a vacuum, right?
Right.
Everything they do, every action
Yeah.
has political ramifications, both in the immediate context of things and then also way down the line.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Imagine a mission to train a local militia.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Right, yeah.
But then what about the potential for that militia to actually become a political force or even become destabilizing years down the road?
Right, yeah.
That's the kind of foresight that these imperatives really encourage.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's almost I don't know, it's like they're playing some sort of multi-dimensional chess game
Exactly.
where every move they make has these ripple effects. Crazy.
And that actually leads us to these three core principles that are kind of woven throughout this whole document.
Okay.
They're discrete, precise, and scalable. They're like the special ops DNA, I guess.
Okay, so discrete, so that's kind of like the under the radar thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah, minimizing their footprint.
Yep.
They're often working behind the scenes, completely out of sight.
Right.
Think of it like a surgeon.
Okay, yeah.
They make very precise incisions to get a very specific outcome.
That's a good analogy.
And that's the level of targeted action they always strive for.
Interesting, okay. And so I'm guessing that's all about minimizing those unintended consequences.
You got it.
And collateral damage and stuff like that.
Yeah, every action, every target is meticulously chosen to maximize the desired effect, but then also minimize any negative fallout. You know what I mean?
Wow. I mean, that level of precision is just incredible to me,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about these super high stakes operations.
Right.
And then what about scalable? So does that basically mean they can adapt to different situations?
Exactly, yeah. Whether it's a small team, maybe they're training foreign forces, or it's a larger operation involving direct action, the size and scope, they're adjusted to perfectly match that strategic objective.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? They don't bring a hammer when what they really need is a scalpel.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, when I think special ops, I think, combat's the first thing that comes to mind.
Right, yeah.
But this document really highlights how that's actually only one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It actually outlines 14 core activities.
Wow.
And a lot of them don't involve direct combat at all.
You're right. This is where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah, tell me more.
So you've got, there's things like civil affairs operations.
Okay.
There's foreign humanitarian assistance.
Right.
You've got military information support operations. And even preparation of the environment,
Okay.
And these activities might sound a little less, flashy or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely essential for achieving those long-term national goals that we were talking about earlier.
Yep. Okay, so walk me through a couple of those. What do civil affairs operations actually involve?
So imagine special ops soldiers, right?
Yeah.
But they're engaging directly with civilian populations
Yeah.
and like local governments. They're building relationships.
Yeah.
They're addressing like needs in the community.
Yeah.
And essentially what they're doing is working to kind of like win hearts and minds.
Ah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes sense.
So it's all about understanding that human terrain
Uh-huh.
just as well as they understand like the physical terrain.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
So they're almost like, what, like warrior diplomats in some cases?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, interesting.
They need to be culturally savvy.
Uh-huh.
They need to be linguistically skilled.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to just like build trust
Great.
in some really challenging environments. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you've also got like foreign humanitarian assistance, which, you know, obviously is crucial after like natural disasters
Yeah.
or in regions that are, you know, struggling with instability or whatever.
Sure. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so it sounds like those specialized skills would make, special ops forces just incredibly valuable in those situations.
Exactly. Think about it. Like the ability to deploy rapidly,
Uh-huh.
they can operate in really like austere conditions, you know,
Yeah.
and they can communicate effectively with those local populations.
Okay.
It makes them just uniquely equipped to coordinate aid efforts,
Right.
to provide security,
Uh-huh.
and even to conduct those like initial assessments, to
Right.
figure out like what are the most urgent needs, you know?
Right. Yeah.
What needs to happen first?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's amazing how, like, a lot of these core activities kind of tie back to this idea of, like, influencing perceptions and building relationships,
Yeah.
even in the midst of, like, a crisis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But the document doesn't stop there. It also dives into, like, the specific characteristics
Right.
that make these soldiers, like, so effective.
Yeah. So they lay out like 8 key characteristics.
Wow. Okay.
Starting with being like regionally oriented,
Yeah.
culturally astute,
Yeah.
politically aware, you know?
Okay.
These aren't your average soldiers.
Right.
They need this like deep understanding of the specific regions that they operate in.
Okay.
You know, language skills, a knack for navigating really complex political and cultural landscapes.
Wow.
I mean, it's a lot.
So it's more than just, like, physical strength
Yeah.
and tactical prowess. It's like it's having this, like, intellectual and cultural edge as well.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other characteristics?
So they also need to operate with low visibility,
Okay.
be incredibly adaptable,
Yeah.
and they have to be both special warfare and surgical strike qualified.
Okay. Break those down for me. What does it actually mean to be, like, special warfare qualified? Special warfare is about understanding the human element of conflict.
Uh-huh.
So the cultures,
Yeah.
the motivations, the social dynamics.
Right.
Think of it like a specialized skill set within special ops itself.
Okay.
It's focused on working with those local populations
Uh-huh.
to achieve those strategic objectives.
So even when they're conducting like those surgical strike missions,
Right.
those like precise targeted operations,
Uh-huh.
they're still bringing like that special warfare mindset to the table.
Absolutely. It's woven into, like, everything they do,
Okay, interesting.
whether they're training those local forces,
Yeah.
gathering intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
conducting a direct action mission,
Right.
understanding that human terrain is just paramount.
That makes a lot of sense.
And speaking of, like, direct action, that surgical strike qualified,
Yeah.
I mean, it means just what you think.
Oh.
It means being able to execute those high precision missions,
Right.
often in, like, hostile or politically sensitive environments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that classic, special ops image, but even that requires, like, this level of expertise that goes way beyond combat skills.
It does. And it's important to remember that even those surgical strike missions,
Yeah.
they're always planned and executed with those core principles in mind, right?
Okay.
Discrete, precise, and scalable.
Gotcha. So to kind of illustrate this, the document actually gives us, like, a real-world example of how all these characteristics kind of come together.
Yeah.
It's the story of Sergeant Johnson.
Okay, Sergeant Johnson.
Yeah, it's a perfect case study,
Yeah.
of how one highly trained soldier can have this, like, strategic impact.
Right.
So Sergeant Johnson, he was like an infantry team leader,
Okay.
but then he later decides to join psychological operations.
Interesting.
He ends up deployed to Africa, and he's leading this mission
Yeah.
that requires him to, like, engage with everyone from like the U.S. ambassador to
Right.
like local vendors. I mean, talk about a diverse range of stakeholders.
That is a diverse range, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great illustration of how like special ops soldiers need to be comfortable
Yeah.
operating across like all these different levels of society.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they might be briefing like a high-ranking diplomat one day
Uh-huh.
and then negotiating with like a local village elder the next.
Yeah.
So crazy, right?
It's pretty amazing.
And then on top of that, he's responsible for coordinating everything, like from logistics and training to finances.
Wow. So he's a true jack of all trades.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
It really highlights the breadth of skills required for success in special ops.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about being a skilled warrior.
Mm-hmm.
You also got to be a problem solver.
Right.
A diplomat.
Yeah.
A logistician. A cultural expert. It's like all rolled into one.
Wow.
Right.
And what makes his story even more like incredible is that Sergeant Johnson was only like 6 months into his new role when all of this happened.
Oh, will it?
He was like thrown into the deep end and he thrived.
That's amazing.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, it really is.
So it's like, it's a testament to, I guess, the intensive training and selection process for like special ops personnel.
Right.
They're prepared to like operate independently and take on like significant responsibilities super early in their careers.
Yeah.
And the document like really emphasizes that his, regional expertise, cultural understanding and ability to engage with like all these different stakeholders were just absolutely crucial to his success.
For sure.
So it shows how those, core characteristics we talked about, they're not just like theoretical concepts. They're like real world necessities for anyone operating in that like special ops world.
Yeah.
So what does all this mean for someone, who's trying to understand like what Army Special Operations is all about?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that Army Special Operations is a highly sophisticated and strategic force. And it operates across this like wide spectrum of activities.
Yeah.
They're not just about brute force.
Right.
It's about understanding all the nuances of the environment and using a variety of tools, both lethal and non-lethal, to achieve those national objectives.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it requires like a unique set of skills and characteristics that go far beyond like just traditional military training.
Yeah.
Like they need to be adaptable, culturally savvy, able to operate independently in these like complex and often dangerous environments.
Absolutely. And that's only the beginning. We've still got so much more to explore in this document.
Right. We're just getting started.
Yeah. We've only just scratched the surface here.
Right.
What really struck me is how this document really dives into the organizational structure of, Army Special Operations.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's not just about those individual soldiers. It's this whole complex web of units that have to work together seamlessly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about. So, like, how does the document break down that command structure?
Well, it all starts with that Joint Force Commander.
Okay.
That's the person who identifies the objectives that might require, those unique special ops capabilities.
Right. Okay.
And it's important to remember, right, these folks aren't just running like rogue missions or something.
Yeah.
They're operating within a much larger strategic framework.
Okay. Yeah. So they're always answering to somebody, basically.
Exactly, yeah. Higher authorities.
Okay.
So how does that chain of command actually work in practice?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, you've got this multi-tiered system. You start with the Special Operations Joint Task Force. And that's often led by like the 1st Special Forces Command.
Okay.
And then you've got the Joint Special Operations Task Force and the Special Operations Task Force.
Okay, so all these different levels.
Yeah, each level kind of plays a specific role.
Right.
And they operate within this clear chain of command.
Gotcha. But it can't just be like a rigid hierarchy.
Right. No, not at all.
I mean, I imagine there has to be some flexibility built in there.
Right.
Just given like the unpredictable nature of the work that they do.
Absolutely. And the document really emphasizes the importance of something they call mission command.
Okay.
And that basically empowers those who are on the ground
to
actually make decisions based on their like real-time understanding of the situation.
Okay.
They can't always be waiting for orders from headquarters, right?
Yeah.
When they're operating in these like fluid and dynamic environments.
For sure, that makes sense. So, like, trust and clear communication just become, like, even more crucial when you're talking about that level of autonomy, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be on the same page, even when they're operating independently, you know?
Wow.
And then on top of all that, you've got these things called advanced operations bases.
Okay.
And that adds another layer of complexity.
So, advanced operations bases, what are those?
Well, think of them like forward operating locations.
Okay.
They're often temporary,
Yeah.
relatively small,
Mm-hmm.
and they're set up close to where like the action is happening.
Oh, okay.
And it allows those special ops to really extend their reach
Okay.
and provide a more localized presence,
Okay.
you know,
Right.
whether it's for prepping for missions,
Yeah.
gathering intelligence, or supporting units that are already in the field.
Okay, so it's like a mini headquarters
Right, yeah.
tailored to the needs of like a specific mission.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also just highlights that adaptability that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
They can literally just like set up shop anywhere.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Crazy.
And all of this requires like a mind-boggling amount of logistical support.
Right, right.
And that's where like the 508th Sustainment Brigade comes in,
Okay.
you know.
So they're the ones like keeping the whole operation running smoothly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even in those like remote and challenging locations.
They handle it all. Supplies, transportation, maintenance, medical support.
Wow.
They've got it covered. And the document really emphasizes that like flexibility and innovation are just key to their success.
Okay.
They have to anticipate needs.
Yeah.
They have to adapt to changing circumstances and basically become masters of creative problem solving.
Right. Wow. It sounds like a nonstop exercise in like logistics and improvisation,
Oh, yeah.
all under just immense pressure.
It is, but that's the reality of special operations.
Yeah.
Being able to make things happen even when the odds are stacked against you.
Wow.
And that planning process
Yeah.
involves this whole network of stakeholders, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
It's not just the special operations units themselves.
I was just thinking about that. Like, you've got conventional forces, you've got intelligence agencies, diplomats. I mean, probably even folks we don't even know about.
Right, exactly.
It's just,
It's massive.
it is, yeah. And the document really underscores how everyone has a role to play in ensuring a mission's success.
Yeah.
It's like this intricate dance with all these different players moving in sync, you know.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So communication, coordination, and that, that bedrock of trust, those are absolutely essential.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely. So it's not just about strategic collaboration. It's also about protecting those assets on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about like special ops. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're often operating in just incredibly high risk
Yeah.
environments.
Yeah.
Like behind enemy lines or in those like politically volatile regions.
Yeah, right. For sure.
So what does the document say about like mitigating those risks? So it outlines a few key areas, right? Including, personnel recovery,
Uh-huh.
populace and resource control,
Yeah.
risk management,
Yeah.
and operations security.
Okay.
All of those are just crucial
Yeah.
for keeping those operators safe
Right.
and then also ensuring mission success.
That makes sense. So let's break those down a bit. Like personnel recovery. I mean, it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I imagine it can get like incredibly complex.
It can.
Right.
It's about having really robust plans and procedures in place
Yeah.
for rescuing or recovering any personnel who, become isolated or missing or even captured.
Okay. Wow.
So think about those like daring rescue missions you see in the movies, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's actually the reality for these units.
Wow. That's crazy. And those missions often involve coordinating with other forces too, right?
Absolutely.
Like both domestic and international.
Right. Yeah. Whether it's conventional units, search and rescue teams, even local allies. I mean, whoever has the resources and the expertise needed.
Wow.
And then you've got like populace and resource control.
Okay.
And that's all about managing the movement and activities of civilians
Yeah.
in a way that, supports the mission, but also minimizes risk,
Okay.
both to the local population
Yeah.
and then also to the special ops forces themselves.
Right.
So it's about maintaining order and security, but then also building trust
Yeah.
and fostering cooperation, right?
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balancing act, especially when you're operating like in a foreign country.
Yeah, that's true.
So you're setting up checkpoints, controlling access to certain areas, working with the local authorities. I mean, it really requires a deep understanding of that local culture and those local dynamics.
Right. Yeah. That cultural sensitivity piece, it seems to be like a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
It's not just about being, like, tough. It's about being smart and understanding that human terrain.
Right. You're picking up on something really important here.
Yeah.
And that leads right into risk management,
Okay.
which is obviously crucial in any military operation, right?
Yeah, sure.
But even more so in special ops.
Yeah, because the stakes are so high.
Right.
And the margin for error is just so thin.
Exactly. The document really stresses a very deliberate process
Yeah.
for identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks.
Okay.
So it's not about being reckless.
Right.
It's about calculated action.
Mm-hmm.
And then also having those backup plans for when things inevitably go sideways,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
which they always do.
Yeah. And then there's, like, operations security.
Right. Yeah.
So that's all about keeping those plans and activities under wraps. Right.
Exactly. They have to be incredibly careful about the information that they share, who they talk to, how they move around, just minimizing the chance of the enemy catching wind of their operations.
Right.
And this applies to everyone involved, right?
Yeah.
Not just the soldiers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
One loose thread can unravel the whole operation.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm sensing a theme here, like attention to detail,
Right.
meticulous planning, and just like a constant awareness of those risks involved. It makes you realize, like, these missions are anything but spontaneous.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And all of this all takes a toll on the people involved, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the document doesn't shy away from the importance of force health protection,
Okay.
both physically and mentally.
Right. So we talked about the, intellectual and cultural demands of these roles, but like the physical and psychological pressures,
Yeah.
they must be just immense.
Oh, absolutely. They're constantly pushing their limits.
Yeah.
They're operating in these, like, demanding and often dangerous environments.
Right.
So they need, like, a really robust support system to stay healthy
Uh-huh.
and to stay resilient.
Right. So the document actually mentions something called, like, the Tactical Human Optimization Rapid Rehabilitation Reconditioning Program.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, THOR3 for short.
CHOR3, okay.
Yeah, it sounds, like, intense.
It is, but, like, in a good way.
Okay.
It helps these soldiers achieve, like, peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in terms of, like, physical fitness, but also, their cognitive function, stress management,
right.
their overall well-being.
So it's like a holistic approach
Yeah, it is.
that recognizes that these are, like, human beings, not machines.
Right.
Operating under, like, extreme pressure.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. It's really great that there's, like, this dedicated program to address that, human element.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not just about individual resilience, right?
No.
It's also about that sense of, like, camaraderie and brotherhood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That shared experience, the reliance on each other, the bonds that are forged in these, like, intense situations.
Yeah.
It creates a level of trust and loyalty that's almost impossible to describe,
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And all of this is happening in environments where those very real threats exist.
Yeah.
Like, the document really highlights the crucial role of, like, explosive ordnance disposal units.
Oh, yeah, EOD.
Yeah, EOD. Those are the folks dealing with those, like, incredibly dangerous devices.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to mess with EOD.
Oh.
They're highly skilled specialists.
Yeah.
And they're literally risking their lives to make sure those special ops teams can operate safely.
Right.
So they're clearing routes, they're securing areas. It's all in days' work for them.
Yeah. And I mean, their expertise is, like, constantly evolving, right?
It is, yeah.
Because those threats are constantly evolving, too.
Yeah, you got to stay ahead of the game.
It's a scary thought. It's like this constant, I don't know, like, game of cat and mouse, right?
Yeah.
With lives hanging in the balance. And then you've got, like, those CBRN threats.
Oh, yeah. Chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear.
It gets, like, even more terrifying.
It does. Those CBRN threats are the ultimate wild card.
Right.
They're difficult to detect, they're difficult to counter,
Uh-huh.
and they can have potentially devastating consequences.
Oh, wow.
But the document does assure us that they have, like, a multi-layered approach to dealing with these types of threats.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, it starts with intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what you're actually up against.
Right.
And then it's about having the right equipment and training.
Okay.
So like specialized suits,
Yeah.
detection devices,
Uh-huh.
decontamination procedures, the whole 9 yards,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, being able to coordinate with other units, right?
Yeah.
Like those CBRN defense specialists
Okay.
to contain a threat
Mm-hmm.
and minimize damage.
Wow. That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
But it is reassuring to know there are like plans in place to deal with those worst case scenarios.
Mm.
This conversation is really giving me like a much deeper appreciation for the sheer complexity of like Army special operations.
It is complex, and we've only just begun to explore how these forces are actually employed across different types of military operations.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, it's fascinating to see how adaptable these forces really are.
It is.
So I'm interested to hear how the document, kind of breaks down their roles across like different types of military operations.
Okay, yeah, that's where this document gets really insightful.
Aye.
It's a good reminder that the work of, special ops, it spans like a really wide spectrum from peacetime engagements all the way to full-blown conflict.
So it's not all like, just direct action and covert missions.
Not at all. The document talks about military engagement,
Okay.
security cooperation, deterrence.
Okay, so those sound more like diplomatic than military.
Yeah, but they're like essential pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So it's about building relationships with partner nations,
Right.
training foreign forces,
Yeah.
deterring potential adversaries, basically just preventing conflict whenever possible.
Exactly. They're like laying the groundwork for smoother operations if a conflict does arise.
Right. Okay.
So think about it. Building that trust and understanding in advance
Yeah.
can make a huge difference down the line.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Absolutely. So they're not just elite warriors. They're also like skilled diplomats and strategists.
Right.
What I find fascinating is this idea of, special ops working in those like less conventional roles.
Yeah.
It really expands my understanding of like what they do.
It should. They're incredibly multifaceted,
Yeah.
Their expertise in working with local populations, navigating cultural nuances,
Yeah.
building relationships
Okay.
can be just invaluable in these contexts.
Okay, interesting.
And the document actually emphasizes how these, what they call shaping activities, they're directly tied to those national objectives.
Okay.
And it often involves, close collaboration with the State Department
Yeah.
and other government agencies.
So it's not just like the military acting on its own.
Right. It's like a whole of government approach.
Okay, that's interesting. But what about when like a crisis hits?
Yeah.
What does the document say about their role in those situations?
So it talks about how special ops are employed in like crisis response and limited contingency operations.
Okay.
So those are situations that require like a swift and decisive response,
Yeah.
but might not actually involve like full-scale war.
Okay, so it could be anything from like evacuating civilians,
Right.
providing humanitarian assistance,
Yeah.
to conducting like targeted strikes against specific threats.
Exactly. And, special ops are uniquely suited for these types of missions
Okay.
because they can deploy really quickly. They operate with that like light footprint that we talked about, and they have the expertise to navigate those, those complex and sensitive situations.
I can see how those skills would be like absolutely essential in a crisis.
Yeah.
They need to be able to like adapt, think on their feet,
Right.
and just like make those tough decisions under immense pressure.
Yeah. And those are like the hallmarks of special ops personnel.
Okay.
The document actually highlights how they often establish that early presence in a crisis zone.
Yeah.
So they're providing like crucial intel
Right.
and then setting the stage for those follow-on forces.
It's like they're the tip of the spear, right?
Yeah.
Paving the way for a larger response.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And their actions in those like early stages of a crisis can really shape the course of events,
Okay.
potentially preventing a situation from like spiraling out of control.
Wow. That's crazy.
But of course, the document doesn't shy away from the reality of like large-scale combat operations either.
Right. I mean, that's what most people probably think of when they hear special operations.
It is, yeah.
Right.
It's definitely a core part of their mission set. And the document really emphasizes how those special ops forces contribute
Yeah.
to the overall like joint force effort
Okay.
in those large-scale conflicts.
So it's more than just like, daring raids behind enemy lines.
Oh, yeah, much broader than that.
All right.
They could be involved in targeting those high-value enemy assets,
Uh-huh.
disrupting enemy networks,
Okay.
gathering intelligence,
Yeah.
training and advising those local forces.
Right.
I mean, the list just goes on and on.
It sounds like they play a role in like almost every facet of a large-scale conflict.
They can,
Wow.
and their capabilities are in high demand
Yeah.
because they bring that, that unique combination of skills and
Wow.
experience to the table.
Right. The document actually outlines like several specific ways that they can contribute.
Yeah.
So like disrupting enemy anti-access and area denial capabilities,
Okay.
attacking deep targets,
Right.
conducting influence operations.
Yeah.
It's pretty like mind-blowing.
It is. They
Yeah.
can shape the battle space,
Mhm.
create opportunities for those conventional forces,
Yeah.
and influence the trajectory of the conflict
Yeah.
in ways that very few other units can.
Wow.
It's really eye-opening to see the sheer breadth of their mission set.
Yeah.
They're not just a specialized force for a specific situation.
Mm.
They're truly versatile and adaptable.
Okay.
And they can be employed across that entire spectrum of military operations.
Okay. Wow. And that speaks volumes about the level of training
Yeah.
and expertise that these individuals possess.
Right.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
They're constantly learning and evolving and adapting to just these ever-changing global challenges.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, this deep dive has really challenged any preconceived notions I had about Army special operations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much more than just elite soldiers conducting covert missions.
Right.
It's this incredibly sophisticated and integrated force
Uh-huh.
that plays this vital role in achieving national objectives across this wide range of scenarios.
Absolutely. And you hit on a key takeaway from our discussion today.
Oh, yeah.
Understanding the strategic context in which these forces operate.
Uh-huh.
They aren't a standalone entity.
Right.
They're an integral part of a much larger national security apparatus, right?
Yeah.
Working in concert with other agencies
Mhm.
in partner nations.
It's been a fascinating journey unpacking this document with you
Yeah, it has been.
and just, exploring the world of Army Special Operations.
Yeah.
So, what's a final thought you can leave our listeners with? Something to ponder,
I think the real question that this deep dive raises is, how can we apply those core principles of discrete, precise, and scalable operations to challenges outside of the military context?
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These principles of adaptability,
Yeah.
strategic thinking,
Yeah.
meticulous planning.
Okay.
I mean, those can be valuable in any field,
Right.
whether it's business, diplomacy, or even personal growth.
I love that. It's about taking those, lessons learned in just the most demanding environments
Yeah.
and applying them to other aspects of our lives.
Exactly. The challenges may differ,
Uh-huh.
but those underlying principles of effective action,
Yeah.
they remain the same.
Food for thought indeed. A huge thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Army Special Operations. If you're eager to delve even deeper, we encourage you to check out the source document itself, ADP 305 Army Special Operations. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.